Welcome to the Alchemy of Ascension Season 2. I'm your host, Waxela Sananda, and we are exploring our galactic origins and becoming multidimensional. Today, I am so happy, and it's my great joy to present to you someone who is very much in touch with his starseed origins, Jean Ang. Welcome, Jean.
Hi, Michelle. Great to be with you and the group, and looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, I am too. I've been so looking forward to this. And so, while I'm sure many of the viewers are already familiar with your work, some may not be. And I want to make sure everyone really has an understanding of who Jean is and all of the things that you've accomplished already in your life. So, I'm going to share some of your background and what you're up to, and then we'll get into questions. Jean Ang, PhD, has a healing practice based in Thousand Oaks, California, and sees clients for a number of energy healing and shamanic healing practices. He teaches seminars on the integration of science, spirituality, and healing. Jean travels the world facilitating healing sessions and workshops using the Arcturian healing method, a modality he created as a synthesis of his studies in healing. Jean received his BA from Stanford in Human Biology and Philosophy, Religious Studies, and was formally trained as a neurobiologist at Yale, where he earned his doctorate in basic mechanisms of how the brain develops, followed by a postdoctoral fellowship on how ultrasound can affect the developing cerebral cortex. After his postdoctoral fellowship, Jean decided to step into the role of a facilitator of healing in order to directly interact with helping people. Most of his work centers around the use of subtle energy to help align the subtle energy bodies so that healing can occur, whether it be physical, emotional, mental, and or spiritual. Jean doesn't see himself as the healer, but simply as part of the interconnectedness that occurs when facilitator, client, and source love God interact to bring healing forth. He sees his teaching engagements and seminars as an extension of this interaction that occurs on multiple dimensions to bring wholeness, understanding, and evolution to all involved. And I just love that. I don't always share, all of, that much reading, but it's so powerful where you've come from. So because this is my first time interviewing you, and I haven't asked you this before, I'm sure some people are already familiar with your origin story, but I would love to hear, how does one go to, through all of that, and you became a neurobiologist and then got into Arcturian healing? That's very unusual. So I'd love to hear how that happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is an interesting story, and maybe I'll write it down one day soon. But so this can be kind of a trial run on that. But I was always interested in healing, pretty much from I don't know, a young age, but like starting in high school. I was inspired by a book by Bernie Siegel, actually called Love, Medicine, and Miracles, and so was always interested in doing some type of healing work, and kind of at first going the traditional route with like pre-medical studies and science. And but at the same time, I was also had a kind of a rich, or was always interested in a more spiritual life. So kind of right around the time that I had finished my uh, PhD in neurobiology, where I think I was trying to express my interest in consciousness, and had a number of different spiritual experiences, or at least consciousness experiences, which we can talk maybe about later. But just to make this sort of more compact, the story, um, right around when I had finished my PhD and was doing my postdoctoral fellowship, this sort of synthesis of spirituality and science sort of came to a fore. And at that point, when you finish a postdoctoral fellowship, you can either go into industry or continue in academia. And that was the period where I felt there was an opening to actually embody more of the soul healing aspect. And that's when I chose to start doing energy healing, and met a number of different healers who are teaching me, and as well as studying different healing modalities. And so that was kind of the opening where I got shifted over into more, I guess, spiritual or consciousness based healing, rather than staying in a more traditional scientific mode of healing. And I think that was just part of a blossoming of sort of my own soul DNA, and the opportunity that was, I think, on the planet for that to happen.
Mhm. Wow, beautiful. So I'm sure that your background in neurobiology helped you maybe bring like a scientific understanding to how healing and frequency works. And I know that you work with various frequencies. So I'd love to hear, how do you feel like that intertwines? And I'm sure it makes you a unique type of healer to have that background.
Mhm. Yeah, I think the scientific background is very helpful. I'm thinking of different people like Greg Braden and Bruce Lipton, who've sort of combined sort of their science background and presenting it in this sort of new age frontier, or they call it sometimes frontier science, studying various aspects of consciousness, healing being one of them. Another scientist who's done that and written a number of books is Claude Swanson, that people may know of, and he was a theoretical physicist, sort of presenting different models. So myself, I feel like the science background sort of helps to speak to a larger audience who may be embodying more of that scientific materialist view, where physical matter is primary, and are being introduced to their own experiences of spirit. But the two views have traditionally been kept apart. And so sometimes they need someone or a framework that allows them to integrate their personal experience with spirit or consciousness, with where their educational background may have come from, which I think most people now in the modern age has come through science and more materials based view. And so I think I can reach certain people where that's important to them to, have a scientific background, but yet also accept or um, uh, behold or hold their spiritual experiences, which may be more subtle. So it gives them a language to understand that.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially now where people really are becoming more and more aware of energy and frequency and it's not like the gap isn't quite as big, it feels like, as it once was. It's as if science is sort of catching up to the world of energy and multidimensionality and quantum. So that brings me to you have become what you call an Arcturian healer. And how now, tell me, what does that mean? What is Arcturian, or what is Arcturus, and how did that happen? Um,
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Well, Arcturus is starting from the physical dimension, is an actual star in the Boots constellation, about like 33 or 35 light years away. And but I connect to Arcturus or Arcturian in a more spiritual manner, seeing these as spiritual beings, much like someone might connect with angelic beings, or a shamanic practitioner might connect with helping spirits and or guides. And other people have already connected with Arcturians in this more spiritual or multidimensional way. And there's a number of books that have been published, and even going back to Edgar Casey in this more modern era, who is that sleeping psychic or prophet. And he has a number of readings about Arcturians being sort of spiritually sort of way shores in terms of healing, and also a portal through which many souls who are incarnating into this planet may come through. So that's why when people sort of hear that word Arcturus or Arcturians, who have never really heard about that before, they feel a certain resonance or sort of ignites something in their deep memory. And I didn't even know really about the Edgar Casey piece when I was sort of connecting with the Arcturians. Um, but other historical traditions may have already been connecting with the Arcturians, but calling them maybe something else. So it's probably somewhere in our deep past, this connection, as well as different indigenous tribes have connected with different star systems, and Arcturians being one of them. But when I connected with them, it was mostly through shamanic practices and mostly through this model of helping spirits or spiritual guides. And my connection with them is brought through mostly like a healing practice through energies or frequencies. But different people have connected with them in different ways depending on their strengths. So some people might connect to them and through a more therapeutic, like a psychotherapy type way. Others may connect to them like and express that connection through sound healing. So really, or writing, like in books. So, and bringing through the frequency or the consciousness through the written word. So it kind of depends on a person's strength and in terms of how they can connect in this physical world. And I see it as a way to enhance our consciousness or work on our own sort of subtle system to kind of show up in the world in a stronger way in terms of who we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And so when you first became aware that you were channeling Arcturian frequencies, was that something, I mean, I know that they can show up, you know, like in light ships, they can show up in meditation, it can be, you know, it can be very subtle, it can be very profound. So, you know, how did you become aware it was actually Arcturus that you were channeling from or receiving from, however you state that? And what's the difference too, if I can make this a two-part question, how did you know it was Arcturus, and what's the difference between, let's say, Arcturian frequencies and another star system like Sirius or Pleiades or something like that?
Mhm. Yeah. Well, kind of that backstory we were talking about, how I went into healing. There was a period during that initial training time. I was still in science and was then doing a lot of workshops and working with healers. But I usually listen to an intuitive voice just to help guide me. And one day I just heard from a voice, it might have been that intuitive voice, that I was Arcturian, or yeah, that was actually what it said. And I didn't even really remember where I had heard that word. So I kind of just kept it, filed it away in the back of my mind, and was sort of looking through different books that I might have, where that might have come from. But the sort of short version of the story is that I realized that I had read that or seen that word in a book by Joshua David Stone, who had written a number of ascension books, maybe a lot of them actually. And I had read that right before I started my PhD. So this was like in about 1999. And but I hadn't even thought of different star beings, or that wasn't even my framework. But I believe that book had a transmission in it, and it went sort of deep into my subconscious. And then at the appropriate time, it sort of opened up with that sort of that intuitive voice, which was about 8 years later. And so from that point, when I was starting healing, to about another, let's see, about 5 years, I didn't really bring anything out with the Arcturians until around 2012, which is interesting, also a time point. So it took about that amount of time to explore, mostly through shamanic journeying. And like you said, I did a number of trainings with Dr. Stephen Greer, who connects with different extraterrestrial beings, where you can actually, you know, see different starships, like you said, in the night sky. And sort of this background maybe is sort of symbolic of that. So one of the trainings I did with him was at Mount Shasta. And so that probably also downloaded a lot of information into my system to kind of just open up my consciousness to this connection. And then the shamanic journey is very specific. So I specifically journeyed to the Arcturian. So that's how I knew I was connecting to them. And then just to answer your second question, I think like as people maybe are more open to working with spiritual presences or beings, you begin to get a sense of their, what I call like their vibrational signature. And so I think it's mostly through intention, that you intend to either connect to, let's say, the Syrians, or connect to the Arcturians in your meditation or your journeying or your healing session. And then you get used to the feeling of that frequency when they come in. And then it's sort of like how you know a friend, through their email. You can kind of tell it's them or who another person, or if it's some sort of fake person, like maybe who like stole their email, like it's not them by the way they write or they sound behind the words. So I think you get used to that also in your meditations, the vibrational feel for each of these different groups.
Yes, I like how you put that. That's true. There's like a frequency, a flavor, something you can feel and experience, and it becomes familiar to that
Hmm.
point where, a lot of us, if it's a family member, will say, walks in the room and we're not even looking that direction, we can kind of feel that they're there. So I thank you for putting it in those terms. That makes sense. And I just because I feel like it's really appropriate that you have Mount Shasta behind you, and you had your experience in Mount Shasta. I want to share an experience that I had there with a friend last year. It was a year ago, last August. And it was a friend who was camping with me in Shasta, and we were just talking about starseed origins, and we met with a couple other people and we were having a lively conversation. And she hadn't really, pondered it much for herself. And so this man we were talking to said, well, look up and what star speaks to you the most? And we're beautiful Mount Shasta night sky. It's just gorgeous. And so she looks up and she's like, that one, and she points to one, and he's like, well, how does it feel for you? And she's like, yeah, it just feels like home. I don't know. And then just moments later, through these very, very tall trees comes this bright, bright light. An unexplainably bright light. It's a starship or a light ship. And she, startling to her, it was when that happens for the first time, it makes an impact. And she's like, whoa, what's going on? And it was clearly a sign, that yes, you've discovered your star origins. And then what was so interesting, the next morning, we got up, and she was a little like, whoa, that night, probably had trouble sleeping. But the next morning we got up, and we were having a conversation, and she's like, do you really think that I could be Arcturian? And I look at her dress. She's got this dress with all these different stars, on it, and constellations, and none of them are labeled except one. And I happen to look down, and it's right over her heart, and it says Arcturus. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't even believe this synchronicity is ridiculous. And she'd never seen it before. She'd never noticed that it said that. And so we just had such a laugh about that. And it was just such confirmation, and the way that our guides deliver that information. And then she's like, yes, I just know this is right. So it's just, and fun and playful too, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it's very playful. That's great.
So I just love the way that, the various ways that we can come in contact with our starseed origins. I, for instance, became very familiar with Sirius B. I don't know why. I just knew at some point that's like my home, and it's
Uh-huh.
a water world, and I can see it and feel it, and I know, like have memories from there. And I think we're probably all so multidimensional, we could tap in and have memories from many places, not just one. Is that how you would see it as well?
Yeah, yeah, and like I think people have, like you said, very probably multiple connections, and sort of it's evolved. Like also at like Mount Shasta, just to speak of another group that I feel like I connected with. They just gave me a name, or I just call them the Intergalactics.
Hmm.
So like different star systems like Orion too,
Yeah.
and like you said, Sirius. So I think we can have multiple sort of soul genetic DNA.
Yeah, for sure. And then maybe we feel more at home with one But yes, we're certainly not limited in any way to just being from one place. Okay, so as I like dive in a little bit more, I'd love to hear your perspective on, there's some strange things happening in the world right now. And I would love to get your take energetically. I mean, what is this shift that we're in? Is this the shift that we're in? And what do you think is happening energetically
Mhm.
in our reality right now?
Yeah, I mean it's a it's a great time. It's a challenging time. It's a new time, and I think a lot of what's happening is it's definitely global, and I would think even like you said, galactic or multidimensional. But the global piece, wherever a person is in terms of how they're viewing their reality internally, externally, is undeniable. And I think, if anything, that's, from my perspective, is one of, I don't know if the benefit is the right word, but at least the big shift is that it's very difficult now to not see how we're all interrelated. So like if we like talk about the virus, it's a part of nature and it moves without any borders, without any really view on sort of our different mental ideas. It just sort of moves in a very energetic, natural way. And that sort of does see kind of point out that our view of like borders or countries or even mental constructs is it's helpful, but it's also temporary and not as solid as what we once thought. Whereas if we weren't sort of confronting this challenge both energetically as well as physically, then we can still kind of hold our different views and also our view like here's one country and the sort of somewhat independence of this country, although I think people were already beginning to see that our interdependence. But now it's very difficult not to see that and experiencing that directly. So I think in some ways it does depend on how people view it, but I see it as something that can actually move us forward in terms of our consciousness development, and that's sort of my sort of sense of what's going on.
Mm. Yeah, thank you for that. I like that idea that, it's kind of breaking down some of those ideas about borders. And yeah, we are all connected, whether we realize it or not, we certainly are. Um, this is kind of a very different topic, but something that I wanted to ask you about. I heard you mention in one of your interviews, Metatron and Melchizedek. And I'd love to ask you, and a lot of my speakers go by the last name Melchizedek.
Yeah,
Are they Arcturian energies? Are they archetypes? Are they actual beings? Can you tell us more about them?
yeah, yeah. Maybe we can experience some of those frequencies later. I know we're gonna do some experiential pieces, but sort of just in the way that the Arcturian healing method as a healing modality evolved, at a certain level, sort of these other beings such as Metatron, the archangel, and then Melchizedek, who I see as a spiritual being, like who incarnated in a number of different forms on the planet to sort of help the evolution of the planet, sort of appeared or wanted to be also integrated into the modality, or I felt a resonance with them. I do see them as separate than from the Arcturians in the sense that they're different vibrational frequencies or consciousness, but closely in resonance. So the term I usually use is called combinescence. So like it's two terms combined essence. And I learned this in a school, meditation school called Clair Vision. So certain spiritual beings that have very close resonance to each other kind of almost can combine together in the spiritual world. Or we sometimes can perceive them as one being and then we may perceive them separately. So I feel like Metatron, Melchizedek, the Arcturians, probably other spiritual beings have a very close combination or resonance with each other. So they did come through, particularly, this is just more relative to the modality, in level 5, the Metatron energies came through with the Arcturians, and then level 6, the Melchizedek energies came through. So I see them also in terms of this helpfulness, working together as a spiritual consciousness to uplift humanity.
Hmm. Interesting. Thank you for that description. I know there are so many beings that are helpful out there and so many terms. And, it's kind of nice to have some background on who we're working with sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, okay, well, maybe this might be a good time since you just talked about it to go into that healing experience and kind of just get our own experience of what these frequencies are like. So, would you like to lead us in an experience now?
Yeah, sure, sure.
To pin your video.
Okay. Yeah, so we can experience three different healing frequencies. The first one will be called the Metatron, Melchizedek, Arcturian mandala healing frequency. Then we'll experience the Arcturian Metatron spiritual device for timeline shifting, which shifts your timeline to the most ideal timeline. If you're already on your most ideal timeline, then it sort of stabilizes that. Uh, and then we'll experience the Arcturian divine fire healing frequency, which is a more pure Arcturian frequency. Is sort of the latest, actually, just in terms of these levels. It's what's coming out in December is level 9, so people get a kind of sense of that. And the way I usually run them is I'll say the name of the frequency when it starts, and then I'm pretty silent while it's being channeled. You can just feel this. And of course, it works both live. So I'm intending it for right now. We're doing this live. So whoever will listen to this. And then whenever you listen to the recording, it acts like a resonance tuner. So you can connect to it that way. Okay. So we're going to start. So we're starting the Metatron Melchizedek Arcturian mandala healing frequency. And you can make a silent intention for however you would like these frequencies to work in your system, whether that be for healing on the physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual level. Also, they can work quantumly, meaning they can work wherever is most needed based on your own innate intelligence. So we're continuing to channel the Metatron, Melchizedek, Arcturian, mandala healing frequency. And now we're shifting to the Arcturian Metatron spiritual device for timeline shifting. Continuing to channel the Arcturian Metatron spiritual device for timeline shifting. And finally, we're starting the Arcturian divine fire healing frequency. Continuing to channel the Arcturian divine fire healing frequencies. And that completes the last healing frequency. And when you feel comfortable, you can move your fingers and toes. You can open your eyes and snap your fingers.
Thank you for that. That was beautiful.
Okay.
I definitely felt I felt like this very focused, clear current is the best word I have for it. Like it felt like going up the back of my spine. And then on my right, sort of like the right side of my back of my neck and above the top of my spine, just this like almost like a pressure, as if you would feel almost like if you would feel sinus pressure, except it was back here. It was interesting.
Oh, that's great. Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah. So, can you give us an example of what some of the people who experience these frequencies, what's what can we expect or what happens? And
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. There have been some cases of like dramatic physical healings, if that's sort of what's in a person's sort of soul path. One woman had contacted me and just said she was experiencing different, pretty acute stress symptoms. And she was in Chicago at the time, and I was in California, so I facilitated kind of a distance Arcturian healing. And then that was it. It was just that one session. I didn't really hear back from her, although she had done sessions before. And then about a month later, her actual allopathic physician contacted me and said that he was really impressed with her change. She had actually had acute thyroiditis, which she didn't tell me that diagnosis. and basically had reversed that. And so he was actually interested in a session.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, but usually that's a lot of times that's how it works, and you kind of facilitate the session, and I just sort of leave it up to sort of the intelligence. I was referring to this innate intelligence of how the frequencies work, and they kind of work with the person's system.
Mhm.
And then a lot of people will have shifts in their life, particularly like some who are taking the Arcturian healing method, where they're kind of soaking in that energy. And it doesn't have to really necessarily make them into healers. It just sort of, if that's not sort of what they want to formally do, but it accelerates their own sort of spiritual DNA and unpacking. So a lot of times their own practice, like a certain psychic reader, her practice really accelerated after taking the level 1 class.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, I'd like to hear more about that. So it's your method that you created and you teach it so that other people can become practitioners. Is that correct?
Yeah. Hmm. Hmm.
And how many, like, tell us a little more about that. How are there various levels and yeah, whatever you'd like to share about that. I'm curious.
Yeah. So it's a bit like a physical platform for people to formally connect with the Arcturians. Of course, you can always connect just, like I mentioned, through intention. This sort of just gives it something like here in the physical plane to make that connection, and then to sort of, through attunements, kind of work with various identified energies. And again, like some people like to just work on their own and make that connection, and then other people may feel a little bit more helpful to have some type of system that they can connect to. But it's not meant to be rigid. So once people connect to that or are tuned to the frequencies, then they can incorporate it in whatever way they are already working. So they may combine it with frequencies they've already been working with in other modalities. So the Arcturians, what I found, are very open and universal, and they're just really here just to serve and help people on their path. And if people are facilitating healings, like in a more kind of formal way, like through sessions or group sessions, then these are different frequencies they could incorporate into their practice.
Hmm.
And there are 9 levels, just to mention that.
Great. 9 levels. So each one can be taken as an individual course as a person
Uh,
progresses.
uh-huh. Well, those that particular 9 is sequential.
Okay. Great.
Mhm. Yeah.
Wonderful. Um, so yeah, so another thing that I kind of wanted to dig in with you a little bit on is I heard you talk about I think you do some conscious dream or lucid dream training.
Oh yeah.
And I heard you say something that really left an impact. You said it's 10 times more effective to do meditation in a dream state than in waking state. And I find that fascinating. So I'd love to hear how you find that to be so, and how can we or the viewers learn to bring meditation into their dream state and become more conscious of
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, yeah. There are various teachings, and also people like teachers who are specifically teaching sort of lucid dreaming. And I learned mostly from the Tibetan dream yoga tradition, which has a fairly extensive series of practices. And just to mention, to answer your question, there's different subtle states of consciousness that we have, and sometimes those may be, particularly the more subtle ones, or unconscious right now, like when we're falling asleep, for example, or even this dream state. We kind of remember a dream, but actually during the dream, we're unconscious to it, or we're asleep to it, or even what's called the deep sleep state, where everything sort of, there's no images. So these dream yoga practices from the Tibetan tradition and other traditions, including the West and South and North, are ways to stay conscious even during these subtle states of consciousness, so you can become more mindful in all, like, the spectrum of consciousness. And the way you would do that, just as a quick practice that people could incorporate, is it works with the chakra system. And so before you fall asleep, you might, like, for example, the traditional chakra that you focus on before falling asleep to become lucid in the dream state is to imagine like a red marble of light in your central channel at your throat center for about 2 to 3 minutes clearly before you fall asleep. And then you just forget about it, like let that fade so that you can actually fall asleep. Because if you keep seeing that very vividly, it may keep you up. And that will bring the energy or prana to that chakra. And that actually helps us become lucid during the dream state. So if you do that for a number of nights, the first couple of times you might not necessarily experience something, or maybe you'll remember dreams better. But it is a practice, and so you can get better. And that will help us, the goal is to help us to become aware during these different states of consciousness.
Great. That's very doable for anybody to just imagining that red ball or marble in that center. Thank you. And can you give us like why a red ball in the throat center and not, for instance, the third eye or the heart or another center? Is there something about that center that helps us become lucid?
Hmm. Yeah. I guess it's through all this different research with different yogis, I mean, over time, that this actual center is involved with the dream state.
Mm.
So there's actually, 3 states of consciousness you could identify, sort of the waking state, the dream state, and the deep sleep state. And different spiritual traditions might work with this energetically in different ways. In the Tibetan tradition, like you mentioned, those other chakras, they're actually, you use those other chakras to become lucid or aware during these different states. So the center of the head, which would be more the head center chakras, you would focus on during the waking state. Uh, and it would be white. And that just happens to be the vibration that they identified in that system. Another system might maybe use a different color or vibration. And then here is involved with the dream state with the red marble. And then the deep sleep state, if you wanted, they call it sleep yoga. If you wanted to become aware during that deep dreamless, like where there's no images, you're just sort of in that very deep state of consciousness, you would focus on a blue marble at your heart. So you can actually use the other chakras. The entire system is before you fall asleep, you can actually focus on another colored marble at another chakra, and it gives different qualities of the dream state. So for dreams of clarity, you would focus on a white marble at the center of your head. And then to be aware during the deep sleep state, you focus on a blue marble before you fall asleep, again for about 2 to 3 minutes. And that will train you to become aware during that deep dreamless period of time.
Great. Do you have a like a teaching on that or a download that people can get
Uh,
if they want to explore that or take a class with you on it?
yeah, there is a link to, maybe it was that interview. It's sort of permanently on the web as a free online class for like an hour where
Yeah.
I go over a lot of these techniques. Maybe that would be a great place to start. I'm not sure how we could provide that.
Yeah, I can link that on the speaker page. So that'll be like a bonus free gift.
Okay, yeah, there you go.
Um, okay, and that's a great segue into you're offering a free gift. It's called the Arcturian Wealth Frequency Healing Session. And in this, it's a recording. So in this recording, we'll be working with the Arcturian wealth frequencies to bring abundance, joy, and prosperity into your life. And so there's a specific frequency called the Arcturian frequency. You're also bringing in the Arcturian gemstone frequency and the Arcturian precious metals frequency. That sounds fascinating. Do you want to share anything more about that?
Yeah. I know, like some of our initiation challenges, like we were talking about this time, uh, involve various things. Maybe it's physical, maybe it's spiritual, maybe it's a combination. Also, maybe economic as a kind of a classroom to learn with. So the request of the Arcturians was to bring through a very in-depth system of frequencies involved with abundance. Sometimes we call that wealth or prosperity. And there are different, if people look at different spiritual practices or traditions, a lot of them have different sort of wealth practices or prosperity practices, as that's something that's necessary, like to sustain our physical vehicle while we're sort of in this incarnation, so that we can do whatever our mission is or our practice. So there's actually 9 frequencies total in this sort of system, and this MP3 is 3 of those main frequencies, sort of where you get to spend like basically like 10 minutes on each of those frequencies, sort of soaking that in. So I'll just say a brief overview of the 3 frequencies that might give people a good sense of that. But the first one's the Arcturian wealth frequency. So that's the most general one, sort of the deepest one on all levels of abundance and prosperity. And then there's an Arcturian gemstone frequency. So it's sort of going into resonance with those information fields that are typically associated with abundance or prosperity, or even like fertility, or bringing through a lot of productivity. So that's different gemstones that we might think of, like diamonds, sapphires, emeralds, opals, rubies, these kind of information fields energetically. And then finally, the Arcturian precious metal frequencies. So this would be going into resonance with those information fields like gold, silver, copper, even in some traditions, pyrite is considered very precious. And when we imbue our subtle bodies with that information, then through kind of what they call like a law of correspondence or manifestation, then into the physical world, those things will begin to manifest in whatever form is appropriate.
I love that. And yes, a lot of people are really being confronted with their prosperity consciousness, and, you know, a lot of job restructuring going on for people. So we really appreciate that. Thank you for offering that as a free gift. You're also bringing in, there's an offer for $97, which is called the Arcturian Nights, KNIGHTS, 12 Soul Frequencies Healing Sessions. I'd love to hear you describe that.
Yeah, so this is also one of the latest, in fact, one of the latest packages that just recently created based on um, the actually soul qualities. So kind of like it would be a nice complement to the Arcturian wealth frequencies, which is in some ways not only related to the physical abundance, it's all the dimensional abundance, but here it is working more on the spiritual level to actually provide spiritual abundance in terms of these 12 soul qualities, which I can just briefly mention here. So these are also Arcturian frequencies, and people probably are very familiar with these, words or soul qualities, and you can think of them as bringing that vibration into your field. The MP3s could also be used as a spiritual practice, besides just the healing session, in terms of like we can always deepen these qualities within ourselves. And I kind of call it the good fortune frequencies, because when you kind of have those qualities in your field, I think just through the law of attraction or resonance, you kind of attract first those kind of spiritual beings that have the same qualities, and also those energies or situations that resonate with those same qualities. So I just mentioned the 12. The first one is silence. The second one is equanimity. And the third one is compassion. So in this package, that would be like the first healing session, which is about 50 minutes. So again, you get like about 10 minutes or so, or maybe 12, to kind of soak in each of those frequencies. Then the second session is humility, harmlessness, and forgiveness. The third session is gratitude, openness, and positivity. And then the fourth session is honor, perseverance, and unconditional love. And they can also be used as an ambient or space clearing tool. So you could play them in your space. Well, a lot of people who've been doing some of the, are familiar with some of these tools, who are practitioners, may like play it during a healing session, but in the background, so kind of like imbuing the space with those energies. So that's another way you can use the tool, the MP3 tools.
I love that. Thank you. So, yes, for anybody that feels called to it, if you enjoyed the frequencies that Jean shared earlier, be sure to grab that free gift. It will be linked on this page and in the email from today. And then if you want to really go deep and get more of those wonderful abundance and healing frequencies that Jean just described, that'll be linked too, and you can get those for $97. So thank you for your generosity and sharing all of that and all of this wonderful information today. It's really been delightful talking to you and learning more about what you do and about the Arcturian experience of frequency healing.
Oh, that's great. Thanks so much for inviting me on the teleconference, and it's great to share this and just open up sort of like a portal, a very beneficial portal for people to connect basically to their own higher selves information, and if they feel resonance with the Arcturians, to know that they're available to just through that intention, either in their meditation or contemplation or healing sessions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely feel it. I actually feel a shift in that there's just like this different frequency feeling. It feels like around my head. It's hard to describe, but it feels good. So I like it. I'm definitely gonna check out more of your frequencies that you're bringing through because I can feel the power in them already in that short that mini session that you guided us in. And so, for everyone watching, we have the Facebook page connected to this. I would love to hear about your experience with the Arcturian frequencies that Jean brought through today, or anything that you'd like to share that you received or realized through listening to this conversation. So, please join and chime in there and let us hear your thoughts, feelings, and ideas about what you learned today in this session. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close. Thank you again so much, Jean. I really appreciate you and your energy.
Thanks so much, Michelle.
You're welcome. And thank you everyone for watching. And, part of the biggest reason that I do this work is so that you all know that we are all connected. We're all ascending together and we are a big community of light. So I thank you for doing your work and being present and being part of this community. And namaste.
Namaste.